LoveLore Library. Chapter 123. Jingwan and son Yilan's marriage was confirmed. Even if the Luo family completely sided with Prince Kang's faction, many people would sigh and wring their hands. Naturally, there would be some who gnashed their teeth in hatred. If they lost after many battles, they might not be reconciled. But they would not be so sullen. In this way, not only Li Hongyuan wanted to know the relationship between old Madame Sun and Lu Qingdi, but others also wanted to know. They were bound to find out the truth. Li Hongming clenched his fists. Except for the third master of the concubine's family, no one else in the Luo family had any contact with his good brother's faction. It was not so easy to integrate into them. The original people ostracized him because he would share the benefits with them. And Luo Peishan did not rely on himself, so he might not be willing to get involved. In this way, he might be able to reverse the situation. Not to mention other things, since Third Master Luo dared to come to his door, he could not retreat at this time. Once this strategy of sowing discord was used well, it would be a great weapon. Perhaps it could make the enemy fall apart without spending a single soldier. Luo Jingying was still resentful of Jingwan's good luck. She broke off the engagement once and still had a good marriage that all the girls in the capital were envious of, but she could not express it at all. At this time, she received something from outside. It was a set of expensive head ornaments. Although Luo Jingying did not know the specifics, at least it was comparable to one of the 12 sets of head ornaments of Sun Yijia. And there were a total of 18 pieces. Luo Jingying touched them one by one and liked them very much. Then she found her most beautiful clothes and put the whole set of head ornaments on her body one by one. However, she was very dissatisfied with the result. In her opinion, this dress was really too shabby and did not match the head ornament at all. Sun Yijia's dowry had a lot of good materials, such as moonlight silk, peacock silk, and mermaid muslin. Moreover, there was more than one bolt. However, Miss Sun, who was once famous in the capital, was as stingy as that bitch Luo Jingwan. "Miss, this head ornament is very beautiful." Luo Jingying slammed it down and turned around to look at her etiquette instructor. The etiquette instructor hurriedly tried to take it down. She was both terrified and angry. "Didn't I say that no one is allowed to come in?" If this kind of private exchange was found out, even if she didn't die, she would lose a layer of skin. "Young lady, don't panic. This servant will definitely not tell anyone about this, including Madam. This servant is here to serve Mississippi. We are one body." The etiquette instructor approached her unhurriedly. "Yes, it's really beautiful. It's perfect for you." She only lacked a piece of clothing. However, she already had such a good head ornament, so why would she be afraid of not having enough clothes? However, shouldn't Miss thank that infatuated person for such an expensive item? Luo Jingying's panic turned into shyness. "But, Nanny, I have nothing. How can I thank him?" "Miss, how can you not have anything? You have the most precious thing in the world, and that is yourself." The etiquette instructor said meaningfully. "Miss, you should at least meet him and thank him in person." Speaking of this, Luo Jingying was a little discouraged. "But grandmother won't let me go out." "If Miss really wants to go out, this servant has a way. It just depends on whether Miss dares to do it." Luo Jingying's eyes lit up immediately. "Why wouldn't I dare? Nanny, tell me quickly." "It's actually very simple. You just have to return a piece of clothing and go out from the back door. This servant is very familiar with the woman guarding the back door." "Nanny, I want to go out. I want to go out now." "Don't be anxious, Mississippi, wait until tomorrow morning. This servant will send the message out first today, so that Miss won't waste time tomorrow." "But Nanny, how can you send the message?" "He is Luo Jingying also knew that the prince's mansion was not so easy to get close to. Last time, she was in a daze, so she didn't ask him how to send the message. The etiquette instructor smiled carelessly. According to that infatuated person's attitude towards Miss, he will definitely leave someone outside the mansion to keep an eye on Miss's movements. Therefore, this servant only needs to go out and find him. Is what Nanny said true? Luo Jingying asked somewhat excitedly, feeling very sweet in her heart. The etiquette instructor nodded with certainty. Then I'll have to trouble you, Nanny. Luo Jingying said with a particularly sweet smile. It's my duty. After saluting, the etiquette instructor left. Oh, a simple, ignorant and stupid girl. She was blindly immersed in her illusory love and couldn't see the current situation clearly. The Luo family was already tied to Prince Kang's boat. Anyone with half a brain should know that if they continued to be entangled with Prince Rui, they would definitely suffer. Don't think that nothing will happen. Prince Rui's purpose was so obvious. Once he succeeded, how could he hide it? Until now, Luo Jingying thought that she had hidden it well. Even if one or two people around her knew something, they didn't know who the other party was. However, she was just a servant who was following her master's orders. However, it was obvious that Prince Rui was favored, but the Luo family was forced to be tied to Prince Kang's side. However, it didn't matter. Prince Rui hadn't given up yet. At worst, he would only protect the third branch in the end. So what if the third branch became the backbone of the Luo family? At the same time, third master Luo, Luo Rongping, also secretly received a gift from Prince Rui. It was 100,000 taels of silver and a gorgeous dagger inlaid with several gems. Coercion and temptation were so simple and crude. Luo Rongping was very clear that in this family, there were many things that his father would only tell his eldest brother. Now that the Luo family was in a struggle for the throne, it was reasonable to say that as a member of the Luo family, he should follow the family's footsteps without hesitation. However, it would be extremely difficult for him to get away from Prince Rui's side. Not only that, his father didn't think highly of him at all. It seemed that it would be the same whether he was there or not. Moreover, he had spent so much effort on Prince Kang's people before, but it basically didn't work. But now, it seemed that Prince Rui wanted to put him in an important position. Should he choose to unite with the family and continue to be disliked? Even if the Luo family had the merit of ascending to the throne in the end, he might be mediocre for the rest of his life. Or should he choose to sever ties with the family and be put in an important position, gambling on a brilliant future? Luo Rongping quietly looked at the things on the table. He didn't think too much and put them away. Obviously, he chose selfishness and turned his back on the family. Apart from a few people who knew about it, the Luo family and many outsiders thought that Luo Peishan was forced to board Prince Kang's ship. However, Luo Rongyan still had a faint suspicion that the source of this matter might be his father. He considered his daughter and chose Sun Yilin. This thought didn't just appear in his mind, it was as if it had taken root. After all, his father had just talked about this problem, and the matter was basically settled a day or two later. It was too much of a coincidence. The imperial court was also not calm. It was because the old minister of the Ministry of Personnel was preparing to resign after the examination, just as everyone expected. As expected, he formally handed in a memorial to resign. Luchingdi rejected it twice, but finally approved it on the third memorial. The Ministry of Personnel was the head of the 6 ministries, and the Minister of Personnel was the head of the Ministry of Personnel. That was a real high position and power, who knows how many people were eyeing a fat piece of meat. Li Hongming originally wanted to take Luo Peishan as his subordinate and push him to the position, but now there was an unforeseen event. Although he hadn't given up yet, he was hesitant about whether to push him or not. After all, the current Luo family's third young lady was only engaged to son Yilin. There was still a year before the Luo family's marriageable age. Moreover, the Luo family may not wait for her to marry. In such a long time, anything could happen. In order to win Luo Peishan's trust, Prince Kong and the others were running with all their strength. If Prince Rui pushed him again, it was basically a sure thing. The Gong Prince's people could only watch helplessly. Moreover, there was a possibility that Luo Peishan could be used by him. So, should he take this bet or not? Li Hongming gathered all his aides and discussed all aspects in detail. Although imperial concubine Su didn't have the ambition to take power like the empress, her wisdom couldn't be ignored. Therefore, Li Hongming also asked for her opinion. Pushing Luo Peishan up was very risky, but if Li Hongming's plan succeeded, it could bring huge benefits. More importantly, Li Hongming didn't have a more suitable candidate in his hands. The people who were qualified to sit in that position held more important positions. He couldn't just give up the benefits that he had been working on for several years for a position that he hadn't obtained yet. Finally, he decided to push. Because he was already in a quagmire, Luo Peishan didn't have so many concerns. He was no longer leisurely in the court. He rarely spoke except for his own duties. He became active. At this time, people also saw the power of the Minister of the Ministry of Rights. He was knowledgeable and talented. His mouth was like a sword. Many times, he hit the nail on the head. Those who debated with him were likely to be angered to the point of vomiting blood and dying in battle. Sitting high on the dragon throne, Emperor Luqingdi cast sidelong glances at him. He didn't expect that Minister Luo, who usually looked very elegant and undisciplined, was actually a fierce general. Emperor Luqingdi asked Luo Peishan to stay and talk. The monarch and his minister had a heart-to-heart talk. Luo Peishan was frank. When he didn't want to be involved in a dispute, he naturally had to keep a low profile. When he had no choice, he naturally didn't hide anymore. He didn't want to do anything else, but he wanted to increase the confidence of his descendants. Otherwise, there would always be some people who wanted to bully them. As long as he was still alive and an official, he absolutely couldn't ignore it. Naturally, the news that Jingwan was bullied by Duchess Ding would not reach Emperor Luqingdi's ears. Emperor Luqingdi thought that the younger generation of the Luo family might have a dispute with others and suffered losses. Luo Peishan's attitude also clearly told Emperor Luqingdi that he was aiming for the position of the Minister of the Ministry of Rights. As for increasing the support of Prince Kong, it was inevitable. In order to push Prince Kong to the throne, he would do his best. Now it was up to Emperor Luqingdi whether he wanted to suppress Prince Kong or not. Luo Jingying's etiquette instructor was right. There were people of Li Hongming near the Luo family. She just pretended to be looking for someone, and someone directly came to find her. However, the expected date was not agreed. Instead, it was pushed back another day. It was because yesterday, Emperor Luqingdi asked the courtiers to submit memorials to recommend the candidate for the position of Minister of the Ministry of Rights today. If there was no accident, the result would be out tomorrow. At this time, Li Hongming had no time to deal with Luo Jingying. However, they probably didn't expect that their words and deeds were clearly heard and seen by a third party. Sure enough, in the morning court the next day, Emperor Luqingdi followed the courtier's opinion. Luo Peishan was popular, and Emperor Luqingdi didn't shy away from saying this point. Then he appointed the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights to temporarily manage the Ministry of Rights. If he did well, he might directly take over the position of Minister of Rights. If he didn't do well, he would naturally choose someone else. It was only then that Prince Kang's people realized that Prince Rui's side did not appear weak because they did not have a candidate. Instead, it was because most of them had recommended Luo Peishan, and they had even more memorials than Prince Rui's side. What did this mean? After the court ended, before Prince Kang's people could say anything, people on Prince Rui's side had already congratulated him one after another. And from the looks of it, they were sincerely happy and didn't seem to be faking it at all. Li Hongyi was originally a rather impulsive person. This scene was simply like poking a hornet's nest. Before the crowd dispersed, Li Hongyi directly glared at Luo Peishan fiercely, and then left in a huff. Li Hongming walked to Luo Peishan with a smile on his face. Lord Luo, congratulations. Eldest imperial brother has always been like that. Don't be offended by him. Luo Peishan faintly agreed. He thought that Li Hongming might not give up so easily, but he didn't expect him to do it so thoroughly. He completely gave up the position of Minister of the Ministry of Personnel and so blatantly drove a wedge between him and Prince Kang. But because it was too open and aboveboard, the effect was indescribably good. Not to mention Li Hongyi, even many of his strategists looked at him strangely, wondering if this had been planned long ago. On the surface, they had taken refuge with Prince Kang, but in private, they had already colluded with Prince Rui in order to push Luo Peishan to the position of Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Li Hongming was very satisfied with this result. It was better than he expected. His decision was indeed correct. He couldn't be more clear about Li Hongyi's character. Even if Li Hongyi was aware of his intentions, he was afraid that Luo Peishan would still have a knot in his heart. It would be impossible for him to trust Luo Peishan wholeheartedly. Then, the effect of Luo Peishan would be greatly reduced, or even counterproductive. If this happened too many times, it would be strange if Luo Peishan's heart didn't turn cold. At that time, he would let bygones be bygones and treat him with respect. The possibility of him working for him wasn't too high. In this short period of time, he had seen the power of Luo Peishan. With the help of his position as Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, he would definitely be like a tiger that had grown wings. Li Hongming's mood was very good, very good. Seeing him like this, Prince Kang's people's suspicion deepened. Luo Peishan sighed in his heart. He had underestimated Prince Rui. Although it was said that one could only gain by giving up something, there were some things that were not so easy to give up. However, Prince Rui just gave it up. Prince Kang was far inferior to this scheming and courage. It was no wonder that Prince Rui was favored. It wasn't that easy to add chips to Prince Kang's chips. Lord Luo. Diwu Taiching stepped forward. It was obviously a joyous occasion for his old rival, but he couldn't feel happy. He didn't believe that Luo Peishan was a two-faced person. It could only be said that Prince Rui's methods were outstanding. Moreover, Lu Qingdi's skills as a ruler had reached perfection. If Lu Qingdi hadn't said who recommended Luo Peishan, most people probably would have thought that Luo Peishan was recommended the most. No one would know that the number was so high, and no one would think to check it out. After all, this memorial was directly presented to Lu Qingdi without going through the cabinet. Lord Diwu. Luo Peishan returned the greeting. He was not in the mood to bicker with Diwu Taiching. I'm afraid that I won't have a chance to appreciate flowers with Lord Luo in the future. First, the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel was much busier than the Minister of the Ministry of Rights. Second, you, a neutral person, went to flirt with Prince Kang's people. Did you want to tell everyone that you, the Minister of the Supreme Court, were also going to rely on Prince Kang? What hurt Diwu Taiching the most was that he couldn't go to the Luo mansion anymore. How many times did he have to see those treasures? How could he live? Luo Peishan glanced at him indifferently. He was unhappy, so he didn't want others to be happy. My third daughter's tricolored peony has bloomed. Diwu Taiching couldn't help but rub his beard. Lord Luo, you're really not kind. Was there such a temptation? It was too much. Ha! Luo Peishan put on a fake smile. How am I not kind? I'm just reporting a small matter. For people who didn't like flowers, it was definitely a small matter. But for people who were crazy about flowers, the temptation was no small matter. Not to mention Diwu Taiqing, the other people who hadn't left were all itching to beat him up and let him show off. Lord Luo is now the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Although it's just a transfer, it's actually a promotion. It's a joyous event worthy of celebration. Why don't we meet at the Luo mansion after we leave the Yamen and have a drink with Lord Luo? The Grand Secretary said. Grand Secretary's words are very reasonable. One by one, they echoed. There were people from all factions in this group, so there was no need to worry about them getting together to discuss anything. They were just here to drink. Of course, the ulterior motive wasn't the wine. Luo Peishan's face darkened. He stared daggers at Wan Rui's Hong. Unfortunately, the Grand Secretary was thick-skinned. He was full of smiles and didn't move. Luo Peishan had been killing people in the imperial court recently, but that didn't mean he had no opponents. He felt a lump in his throat. Tomorrow. He really wasn't in the mood today. Then it settled. The Luo family didn't know what happened after the morning court, but everyone knew that Luo Peishan was now the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Few people in the Luo family, from the masters to the servants, were unhappy. Wang Madam even made the decision to give every servant an extra month's salary. Chapter 124. Luo Peishan just shook his head and didn't say anything. He didn't want to do anything, so he asked someone to call Jingwan and went to the greenhouse. When Luo Peishan was tinkering in the greenhouse, Jingwan came. She changed into simpler clothes and didn't wear anything on her wrist. She was as usual. Luo Peishan didn't know if she really didn't care, or if she kept everything in her heart. At the same time, Luo Peishan felt sorry for Jingwan, but at the same time, he was inexplicably angry. If she really didn't care, how could those who cared about her endure it? They all wanted her to be well, but she was indifferent. Why were they so busy? If she just hid it in her heart, why couldn't she say it out loud? They were all her family. Even if she didn't want them to worry, didn't she know that the more she didn't say anything, the more worried they would be? At least let them know what she was thinking, so they wouldn't be like headless flies. Feeling the coldness emitted by Luo Peishan, and it was obviously directed at her, Jingwan was a little confused. Grandfather, did your granddaughter do something wrong? These words completely ignited Luo Peishan's anger. He caught Jingwan and scolded her. Not to mention Jingwan, the servants serving by the side were all stunned. But listening to his words, it didn't seem like he had offended third young lady. An alert maid hurried to the main courtyard. Hearing the maid's words, Madame Luo hurried to the greenhouse. Only to hear. You are good to this person, good to that person, good to this person, good to that person, meticulous to that person, why don't you treat yourself better? You are 14 years old now, not 41. What you need is the naivety of a girl. You should have expectations for the future. Even if you have seen through the world, it is not now. You will have to go through a long process of decades. If a little girl wants to go all the way in one step, what do you need us old things for? As your closest relatives, are we not worthy of your trust? Do you have to shoulder everything by yourself? After venting his anger, Luo Peishan's anger subsided a little. Seeing Jingwan standing there with her head lowered and tears in her eyes, he still felt sorry for her. This child's thoughts were too heavy. It was true that she was open-minded, but because she cared too much about the people she cared about and didn't care about herself, sometimes it felt like she was being deliberate. Although Luo Peishan knew that she was absolutely sincere, these things bound her and she couldn't be truly open-minded. If the shackles were removed, she would be able to live a more unrestrained and flamboyant life, and her life would be more colorful. It had to be said that Luo Peishan was indeed shrewd with age. The time he spent with Jingwan was not long, but he had already accurately identified the problem with Jingwan. Madame Luo, who originally thought that something had happened, slowly approached. Wan, Jingwan hurriedly wiped away her tears. She subconsciously didn't want her grandmother to worry. This child, you're always like this. Your grandfather is right. If you want to cry, just cry. There's no need to hold it in. She glanced at the surroundings. Everyone, disperse. What are you all doing here? The servants, whether far or near, hurriedly left. Even the people who served them consciously moved away, leaving only the three of them. Luo Peishan quietly looked at Jingwan for a moment, then continued, the rise and fall of the Luo family doesn't need you to worry about. How incompetent am I, Luo Peishan, to have to rely on my granddaughter to maintain the family's glory? If the Luo family really falls, then it can only mean that the Luo family's luck has come to an end. It wasn't clear whether it was because of the words of the two, or because Jingwan really couldn't stop her tears. At least grandfather and grandmother have treated me too well. Granddaughter has nothing to repay them with. Besides, as a member of the Luo family, I should do something. Silly child, it's enough that you have the heart. Everyone has 7 emotions and 6 desires. They have to experience ups and downs. You can't completely reject everything just because you want to reject a certain taste. If you wrap yourself up tightly, perhaps your life will be smooth sailing, but this life will be dull and tasteless. When you're old and look back, you'll find that there's nothing worth remembering. Wouldn't that be too much of a pity? In fact, grandmother sometimes even hopes that you can taste some pain and bitterness. Although it will make us, as your elders, feel distressed, it's better than not having any hope for the life you clearly hope for. You can completely look forward to that kind of life. If you don't even want to try, how can you be sure that you won't get it? Also, whatever you think in your heart, you can tell grandmother. Even if it's a betrayal, grandmother won't blame you. If you feel wronged, you can also vent it out. In the past, when they were in Qi and prefecture, because it didn't involve marriage, Madame Luo naturally didn't see anything wrong with Jingwan. However, after these 2 marriages, she realized that Jingwan was a little abnormal. Although she didn't have to be shy when talking about marriage, nor did she have to be heartbroken when the marriage was annulled, nor did she have to be worried when her future mother-in-law showed displeasure, it was really abnormal that she didn't have any reaction at all. Jingwan cried a good time and felt a lot more relaxed. Perhaps she could live a more free and easy life. When Jingwan calmed down, she also realized that grandfather probably didn't just get promoted to Minister of Rights today. He probably encountered something else. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said these words to her in such a furious manner. Grandfather, did something else happen today? Luo Peishan sighs. He turns around and fiddles with an evergreen tree beside him. That Prince Kong can't be helped. He briefly told what happened after the morning court. Although he was schemed against by Li Hongming, he didn't say that Li Hongming did anything wrong. If it weren't for the support of the Empress and the Sun family, he would have been schemed to death. If he ascends the throne, in the future, most of the power will be controlled by the relatives of the Emperor, and the imperial harem will interfere in politics. The imperial harem interfering in politics. Grandfather, do you mean the current Empress and the future Empress Dowager? Luo Peishan glanced at her. So, this good granddaughter was really impeccable in other aspects except that she was a little ruthless sometimes. This can't be, right? It should be known that in the previous dynasty, the imperial harem interfering in politics was a very serious matter. In the Qi Yuan dynasty, the Li family controlled the river, and the imperial harem was not allowed to interfere in politics. It was directly included in the ancestral precepts of the Li family. The current empress was the daughter-in-law of the Li family. How could she have the courage to challenge the ancestral precepts? Grandmother, there is no such thing as will or won't. It all depends on who has the right to speak. In my opinion, if Empress Sun only wants to be the behind-the-scenes ruler after her son ascends the throne, her ambition is still a little small. At this time, even Luo Peishan looked at Jingwan with some surprise. Jingwan smiled. In my opinion, if Empress Sun replaces Li Xing, she will be the real powerful one. It's true that you dare to think about it, but others don't dare to think about it. Luo Peishan clicked his tongue. Whether the Empress has the intention of interfering in politics in the future is still uncertain. However, her ambition is definitely not as great as what you said. She probably has never thought about it. Luo Peishan stroked his beard. So, the Empress' ambition is still a little small. Jingwan smiled and said nothing. It was not that she dared to think about it, but that in the history of her previous life, there was an empress who was a real ambitious person. She was domineering and powerful, and she was ruthless. There were also queens of other countries, female presidents, female prime ministers, and many other outstanding and great women. They were all good. In her view, there was no such thing as a woman born to be weak and become a vassal. Therefore, she did not feel that the Empress' ambition was a big deal. The problem now is that it is not so easy for me to help Prince Kong wholeheartedly. If it is as you think, grandfather, then the Empress will deal with Prince Kong. The reason why Prince Rui's scheme was so successful was that he grasped the characteristics of Prince Kang's temperament. The Empress is not so easy to be tricked. Moreover, if the Empress interferes too much, it will inevitably arouse the disgust of the other courtiers who support Prince Kong. After all, there are big and small contributions to the ascension of the emperor. Although Ding General Manor is the leader, the Sun family can't take all the benefits. Therefore, it is normal for the same faction to compete for benefits. I am now the Minister of Personnel Affairs. After I squeeze in, I will certainly share the benefits of many people. Then, it is normal for them to take advantage of what happened today to fan the flames in front of Prince Kong. Jingwan thought for a while and said, in this case, grandfather, you can do your best. If you can't do it, you can do as they wish and really switch sides to Prince Rui's faction. If so, what will you do in the future, girl? You can't wait until then to break off the engagement with Sun Yilin, right? In the entire capital, there was probably no other person like Sun Yilin who was willing to keep his hands clean despite having such a high status. When Prince Rui ascends the throne, even if he can't get rid of the Sun family, Ding General Manor is bound to cease to exist. At that time, it is not impossible for you to return, but that is not what your grandmother and I want to see. Then protect Sun Yilin together. If he has integrity and insists on living and dying with Ding General Manor, then before that, if he did not do anything wrong to me, I can wait for him for a lifetime. If there is a child between us, I will do my best to raise him. After a pause, she continued, grandfather, a woman doesn't have to rely on a man to live a lifetime, and it doesn't mean that she is happy to have a man who is good to her. A woman's heart doesn't necessarily belong to the small world in the backyard. At this moment, Luo Peishan finally understood that his good granddaughter was really not a person who cared about love. A man for a lifetime was just her ideal marriage. If she got it, she would be lucky. If she didn't, she would never force it. Grandfather is very happy that you can say these words. Grandfather, you are not qualified to be a scholar official. This Lord Luo's respect for women did not seem to belong to this era. I can only say that grandfather once met a very special woman, and she has a great influence on grandfather. Jingwan immediately glanced at her grandmother with a gossipy look. What nonsense are you thinking? It's not what you think. That person is His Majesty's little aunt, Princess Haiyang. Chapter 125. It would be a lie to say that Jingwan wasn't surprised when she heard her grandfather mention Princess Haiyang. However, based on what she knew about Princess Haiyang from the books and what Nanny Gong said, if her grandfather had really interacted with her before, then it wouldn't be strange for a feminist princess to change her grandfather's view of women. It's true that Princess Haiyang has been criticized in many places, but it's undeniable that she's a heroine who is not inferior to men. Luo Peishan said with a hint of admiration. It seemed that he regarded her as one of his colleagues in the court and did not have any romantic feelings for her. Yun Yang's charm was still there. When grandfather met her, she was probably still young. Naturally, her charm was incomparable. Grandfather was not bewitched by her, but at the same time, he was deeply influenced by her. TSK, should it be said that Lord Luo was very moral, and his ability to accept certain things was also very strong. Jingwan felt that if her grandfather were to throw her into her previous life, she would definitely be able to get along like a fish in water in a short period of time. However, did her grandfather know that Princess Haiyang was the boss behind Rouge Pavilion? Jingwan did not know what to say. After all, it was not something she should know. Jingwan felt that Nanny Gong seemed to know too much. When she was in the palace, she was not a simple person. How could such a person be released from the palace? How could she be willing to serve a little girl in a place far away from the capital? How did grandfather meet Princess Haiyang? Princess Haiyang is still alive and is in Qiyuan. Whether it's a rumor or a history book, it's not the truth. According to Princess Haiyang herself, after she killed the king of the northern Han kingdom, she took advantage of the chaos and escaped alone. However, she was seriously injured. As for how she returned to Qiyuan later, she never told me. Do you know where she is now? I don't know. I haven't seen her since that time. When was that? Jingwan was curious. More than 20 years ago, just before the foreign officials were transferred to the capital. Grandmother, did you see Princess Haiyang at that time? It was reasonable to say that her grandmother should have been familiar with Princess Haiyang on the eve of her marriage. However, Princess Haiyang was still young at that time. When Princess Haiyang was most energetic, her grandmother should have left the capital with her grandfather. Madame Luo seemed to recall something and smiled. I saw her once. She was dressed in men's clothes and looked very capable. However, she didn't hide the fact that she was a woman. She was surrounded by a group of maids and guards. The men were handsome and the women were pretty. They were really good-looking. At that time, there was also a lecher who took liberties with a good girl. She was a hero for once. Although she was a woman, she did all the things a man would do. She went to brothels and casinos, and she was generous with her money. She was like a playboy. Probably because she was a woman, she knew how to please women. Even if you could tell she was a woman at a glance, there were still many girls who were attracted to her. It was said that there was a courtesan who was desperate for her and made a big scene. But your grandfather should be the clearest about this. Madame Luo glanced at Luo Peishan with a hint of ridicule. After all, at that time, your grandfather was dragged out for drinks by Princess Haiyang every few days. Grandmother, aren't you angry? This woman had dragged her husband out for a drink. She was a womanizer with a bad reputation who had countless men. Grandfather was also in his middle age at that time and was also very charming. Wasn't she worried that Princess Haiyang would seduce him? It would be a lie to say that I wasn't angry at all. However, after many times, I wasn't angry. Because every time your grandfather was dragged out by Princess Haiyang, he came back cleaner than his colleagues who came back from social activities. He was never drunk and didn't have the smell of cosmetics on him. He came back early and from time to time, he would bring some interesting things back. I didn't see him so pleasing before. Madame Luo looked at Luo Peishan with a faint smile. Luo Peishan blushed. However, he was wondering why his wife didn't have any reaction at that time. It turned out that she had already noticed some clues. I asked intentionally or unintentionally. Only then did I know that Princess Haeyoung said something like, "This thing may belong to sister-in-law." It turned out that this pleasing Princess Haeyoung. After Princess Haeyoung leaves, your grandfather will become a blockhead who doesn't know how to have fun again. Alas, if grandmother Yuning hadn't married, maybe she would have fallen in love with Princess Haeyoung. Luo Peishan's face darkened. Was he almost stolen by a woman unknowingly? Then he saw his wife's expression. Was he being teased by his wife? Forget it. How could a man argue with her? Princess Haeyoung is knowledgeable and has a strong memory. She repeatedly looked for your grandfather, probably because your grandfather was also talented and had some like-minded interests. Moreover, no matter how manly Princess Haeyoung is, she is still a woman. Only a woman can see her clearly. Her heart is for women. If your grandfather is a fickle man, then he either has no connection with Princess Haeyoung, or he has died in her hands. Well, in those unofficial histories, it seemed that there was no mention of Princess Haeyoung having an affair with a married man. Princess Haeyoung might be a playboy, but she had a bottom line. She wouldn't touch a married man. On the contrary, if such a man offended her, his life might be in danger. It would have been better if Madame Luo didn't mention it. Once she did, Lord Luo's face darkened. He remembered that Princess Haeyoung once wore women's clothes and tried to seduce him. When he failed, she even threatened him. After he refused her righteously, Princess Haeyoung laughed wildly. It said that Lord Luo is a gentleman. It's true. She lifted the pink gauze curtain. Then, while Lord Luo's face darkened, there was also a bit of fear. This was because there were poisonous snakes crawling out from all sides of the bed. If he was really tempted onto the bed, he would definitely be bitten to death by the poisonous snakes. Princess Haeyoung was disliked by countless men, but more men were crazy about her and were willing to be her guests. She was disliked by countless women, but more women were envious of her unrestrained style. Jingwan's eyes moved slightly. Princess Haeyoung was indeed enviable, including Jingwan. Of course, they were not envious of her powerful harem, but they were not restrained in such a social environment. But it was enough to be envious. It was the right time, the right place, and the right people that created such a Princess Haeyoung. She couldn't be replicated. If other women had thoughts that they shouldn't have, would they want to die, or would they want to die? Luo Peishan coughed softly. I've said so much about what should and shouldn't be said. Third girl, you're a smart child. You should know your grandfather and grandmother's intentions. I understand. I've disappointed your good intentions in the past. I won't do it again in the future. It's good that you understand. Come, little girl, come over and tell me. The situation of the flowers seems to be different from the flowers you wrote. What's going on? Perhaps it was because he knew Jingwan's true thoughts. Luo Peishan cared less about what happened during the day. If you, Prince Kong, really didn't care, Luo Peishan wouldn't have shamelessly approached you. If you annoy me, I'll really go against you. You're not the emperor, so I'm not afraid of you. If there was an accident in the future, he could always find a way to protect his granddaughter. As for his grandson-in-law, he would see the situation when the time came. Madame Luo saw that Luo Peishan's frown disappeared and Wanwan seemed to be more beautiful, so her heart seemed to be relieved a lot. Seeing the grandfather and grandson together talking, she shook her head with a smile and turned back to the main courtyard. Luo Peishan threw a tantrum at Jingwan and caused a big commotion. However, the other masters didn't send someone to inform them. After hearing the news, most of them didn't intend to get involved. When the people who asked about it hurried over, everything was fine. And the people who would ask about it were probably the people from the second branch. Luo Jingbue and Sun Yijia walked in front with anxious expressions. Not far behind them were Luo Rongyan and Madame Zhang. "Grandmother, let's go back. It's nothing." Hearing Madame Luo's words, the two of them breathed a sigh of relief. "Grandmother, what's going on?" "Naturally, your younger sister made a mistake and was scolded by your grandfather. Younger sister can also make mistakes." Luo Jingbo was in disbelief. "What are you talking about? Everyone makes mistakes. How can your younger sister not make mistakes?" Luo Jingbo smiled dryly. "Then, what did my younger sister do wrong?" Madame Luo glanced at him. At this time, Luo Rongyan and Madame Zhang also arrived. Madame Luo said faintly, "Her mistake is that she's not selfish enough. Her mistake is that she only wants to be good to others and not be good to herself. Her mistake is that she wants to deal with everything by herself. Do you think these mistakes are enough? Should she be scolded?" Madame Luo's words made them fall silent. Each of them had a strange expression. "All right, you can all go back." After speaking, Madame Luo left first. It had to be said that Madame Luo's words had a great impact on them. If these were really Jingwan's mistakes, they might be the source of these mistakes. Because they didn't do enough, Jingwan had to do more. Because they couldn't help her, she had to bear it herself. The most ashamed person was probably Luo Rongyan. As usual, Li Hongyuan received Wan's daily news in the evening. Speaking of which, did Li Hongyuan not notice the problem with Jingwan? No, even if he didn't know everything, he more or less knew. However, he didn't care too much. After they got married, he could always let her get used to him treating her well and let her get used to letting him solve any problems. However, now it seemed that his thoughts weren't very good. He could forcefully suppress his jealousy and let Wan get engaged, then break off the engagement, then get engaged again. Even if Wan was different from others, it would still have a big impact. Logically speaking, according to Lu Qingdi's indulgence towards Li Hongyuan, it wasn't impossible for him to marry Jingwan as a concubine. However, in reality, that wasn't the case. Li Hongyuan knew very well that he wasn't his father's favorite son. Because of his background and temperament, Lu Qingdi didn't like either of them. However, only by doing so could he reduce the guilt and regret in his heart. It was precisely because of this mentality that led to more indulgence. It was simply a vicious cycle. Most importantly, the throne would be given to any of his brothers, so he wanted to compensate him. He wanted to give him the best things besides the throne, including a wife. No matter how outstanding Jingwan was, no matter how important she was, in the eyes of the emperor, she wasn't worth mentioning. If Li Hongyuan said that he liked Jingwan, Lu Qingdi definitely wouldn't stop him. It didn't matter whether she was a concubine or a concubine. The position of a concubine. Sorry, don't even think about it. It was just like Li Hongyuan's mother. After she lost her status, even if she was conferred the title of imperial noble consort, Lu Qingdi didn't have the thought of supporting her to be the empress. In fact, Lu Qingdi had a very strong sense of hierarchy in his bones. Moreover, he only accepted the way that he thought was good. He didn't care what his son really wanted. If Li Hongyuan said that he wouldn't marry anyone but Jingwan, Li Hongyuan wouldn't do anything. However, Jingwan would die. His son, who had always been a playboy, suddenly fell in love. If it wasn't Jingwan, it was the Luo family's problem. The root of the disaster should be removed. Lu Qingdi's love for imperial noble consort was not deep, but it was definitely deep. However, he didn't think of marrying anyone but Jingwan. Because of all these, in order to marry Jingwan, Li Hongyuan racked his brains and made all kinds of calculations. Only when there was no choice but Jingwan in the end, Lu Qingdi would accept this daughter-in-law who had a low status. In Li Hongyuan's original plan, it was best to let Jingwan bear the title of Jinx. It wouldn't cause any harm to Jingwan. It just so happened that he was Jinx. These two people had strong 8 characters. If they were together, they wouldn't be jinxed by each other. This was the most gentle way to achieve his goal. Although the result of this method was that he was about to drown in a vat of heat. As for those who had been plotted against by him to be Wanwan's ex-husbands, whether they were innocent or not, it had nothing to do with him. They had taken advantage of Wanwan, yet he was still willing to let them live. This was already very merciful. Chen Jingmin and Sun Yilan had bad intentions towards Wanwan. They weren't innocent at all. In Li Hongyuan's plan, Jingwan still had 2 fiancés. He had already chosen the candidates. However, when he saw Luo Peishan's words on the paper, he suddenly felt distressed. His schemes again and again would only make Wanwan bear a heavy burden and unhappy. This wasn't his original intention. After a moment of silence, Li Hongyuan slowly closed his eyes to hide the madness in his eyes. Forget about it after dealing with Sun Yilan. It was safer to directly drag Wanwan into his arms. He could also be less jealous. Otherwise, if one day he went crazy and did something crazy, it wouldn't be good. As for his father, it would be best if he was tactful. Let him live out his remaining years in the position of retired emperor. If he wasn't tactful, then he could only send him to reunite with his imperial noble consort. Because of his distressed heart, Li Hongyuan threw Master Liaochen's warning into the smelly ditch at this moment. At this time, he didn't have enough power. Once there was a coup d'état, the various factions would collide head-on. The country would be in turmoil and foreign forces would invade. The people would be plunged into misery and suffering. This was the same as the consequence of not letting him get what he wanted. The degree of tragedy would be far worse than in his previous life. After a moment, Li Hongyuan continued to read. The Empress. Li Hongyuan couldn't help laughing. In this case, her ambition is really not worth mentioning. In the future, even if I can't let you sit on the throne, I'll let you enjoy the treatment of an empress. This meant that the national treasures level had been upgraded again. Eunuch Mu trembled when he heard his master talking to himself. He wished he could disappear immediately. He knew so many secrets that he shouldn't know. He was in danger of being killed by his master at any time. Therefore, he didn't dare to have the slightest thought of betraying his master. Also, Miss Luo's Empress and whatnot were not ordinary scarce people. After he finished reading, Li Hongyuan pondered for a moment. Ask Luo Peishan if he's going to sleep in the back courtyard or the front study tonight. This prince wants to meet him. Since he had already made the decision to turn the most gentle plan into the most bloody method, then instead of letting Luo Peishan do those useless things, it was better to directly take him under his command. It was enough to focus on controlling the Ministry of Personnel and save the scheming with Li Hongming and Li Hongyi. None of the people around Li Hongyuan were stupid. As soon as he said this, they knew that he was going to make a big move. Perhaps because he didn't do proper work after he went to the yamen, Luo Peishan went to the front study after dinner. It was already late at night, but he didn't go to bed. At this moment, he was looking at the relationships between the various positions in the Ministry of Personnel. It had to be said that it was really complicated. Luo Peishan wasn't shocked by this. Firstly, the Ministry of Personnel was too important. Everyone wanted to have a foot in it. Secondly, Luo Peishan had long been ambitious to be the minister of the Ministry of Personnel. He had long been secretly exploring the situation in the Ministry of Personnel. Under the candlelight, Luo Peishan gently tapped on the table, thinking about where to start to quickly take control of the Ministry of Personnel. The others were actually fine. The most troublesome thing was that Prince Rui had a temporary position in the Ministry of Personnel. Although he didn't have a specific position, he had a lot of power. He was still a prince. Whatever he wanted to do, he couldn't avoid it. It's late at night, Luo Darren still hasn't rested. You're working so hard, it's really my Qi Yuan's blessing. The sudden voice startled Luo Peishan. Fortunately, he didn't have any heart disease. Otherwise, his illness would have flared up. Looking at Li Hongyuan who swaggered in from the darkness, Luo Peishan subconsciously clenched his fists. At this time, Prince Jin was something he had never seen before. Compared to Luqing Emperor, he didn't know how much more powerful the Emperor's aura was. If it wasn't for that face and that voice, Luo Peishan would have thought that this was the resurrection of an emperor like Emperor Taizu. His heart couldn't stop beating faster. He thought that the current imperial court was a fierce struggle between dragons and tigers. With the addition of the Gong Prince, it could barely be considered a tripartite balance. Who would have thought that such a fierce beast was hibernating in the dark? Luo Peishan slowly took a breath, got up, and walked out from behind the desk. This old official greets Wang Ye. No need for formalities. Li Hongyuan casually raised his hand and sat down on a chair. Luo Peishan slightly lowered his head. I don't know why Wang Ye has graced us with his presence. Luo Darren, why ask when you already know the answer? In the dim light, Li Hongyuan's eyes were astonishingly bright. Chapter 126. Li Hongyuan lightly hooked his lips. His style was boundless, yet his imposing manner was overbearing. Facing him like this, who would dare to say that he only had a bag of skin and nothing else? This was the perfect example of ability and beauty, okay? Luo Darren flatters me. Luo Darren, please sit. Now, Luo Darren might as well tell Ben Wang what you think. What I think. Jin Qinhuang did not hesitate to expose himself in front of him. What other thoughts could he have? Could it be that he would allow him to have other choices? Normally, he was already very difficult to provoke. This hidden side of him would only be even more terrifying. Luo Peishan believed that once he rejected him, according to this person's style, his family would be in trouble one after another. He couldn't help but smile. Will Wang Ye still give this old official leeway? If it's others, naturally there won't be, but Luo Darren is different. Even if you reject Ben Wang will not do anything to you. You can even choose to pledge your loyalty to others. In the future, when Ben Wang is in power, Ben Wang will not do anything to the Luo family. At most, Ben Wang will let you enjoy your old age in advance. Luo Peishan's heart slightly moved. What ability does this old official have to let Wang Ye be so tolerant towards the Luo family? Naturally, it's not because of you. No matter what, the Luo family is Ben Wang's future wife's family. I cannot give face to anyone, but Ben Wang's Wang Fei must be given face. Li Hongyuan indifferently said. Luo Peishan's face suddenly changed. Where does Wang Ye's words come from? Your family's third miss, Ben Wang has long seen her. Jin Wang Fei, other than her, there is no one else. Luo Peishan's face was wooden. He really didn't know what expression to put on. Luo Peishan actually wanted to say, Wang Ye, are you joking? Or did you drink too much wine before coming to the Luo family and your mind is not clear? This old official's granddaughter has an engagement. Luo Peishan's mind turned for a long time before he dryly squeezed out this sentence. Engagement. If she can retreat once, she can naturally retreat a second time. In any case, she can only marry this prince in the end. Luo Peishan clenched his fists, suppressing his anger. This old subject will be so bold as to ask, did His Highness intervene in the previous matter? Chen Jingmin and Li Ruyu. When Li Ruyu was scheming against Chen Jingmin, she secretly stopped Chen Jingmin and didn't let him leave. Li Hongyuan was quite cooperative and answered all the questions. Even his father was not so obedient. Luo Peishan wanted to curse. Sun Yilin was one thing, but why was his grandson being targeted by the King of Hell? Marrying anyone would be better than marrying him, right? This old subject's granddaughter has the appearance of a willow tree. She may be a little intelligent, but she doesn't have any great talent. I'm afraid that she is far from being able to enter Prince's eyes. Li Hongyuan looked indifferently at Luo Peishan. Lord Luo, do you think that this prince, like most people, is going to marry her because of the kindness she has maintained? To put it bluntly, even if those people have a limitless future, they are just starting out. Some of them have families behind them that have already sought refuge with others. At most, they will not stand on the opposite side of Wan. If they meet that ingrate, Li Hongyuan sneered. Even if marrying her can bring the support of 10 families, this prince still doesn't care about them. If that's the case, how did that girl enter Prince's eyes? Li Hongyuan was silent. He looked at an unknown place and was lost in thought for a moment. When this prince was young, he often dreamed. In the dream, he was an adult, and there was a woman who was very important to this prince. Her surname was Luo, and her name was Jingwan. At first, this prince did not care much, but this dream never stopped. When this prince was 16 years old and was bestowed the title of prince, he investigated the situation of Lord Luo's family. Then, when Wan entered the capital and saw her, this prince was 100% sure that she was the woman in the dream. Do you think that this prince would let her marry someone else? Luo Peishan felt that it was absurd and ridiculous, but was there any better explanation than this? Jin Qinwang had seen Jingwan a few times. Was it worth it for him to calculate like that at the beginning? Prince, forgive this old official for speaking bluntly. This old official's granddaughter is someone who does not rub sand in her eyes. Complicated places are not suitable for her. In this prince's backyard, other than some servant girls, there is no woman with a name. After marrying this prince, only imperial concubine Su can be considered as her proper mother-in-law. Imperial concubine Su treats her daughter-in-law very well. Presumably, you courtiers have heard about it. Even if this prince has many brothers, there is no situation where sisters-in-law live under the same roof. If those women dare to find trouble with her, this prince will naturally make up for it 10 times, 100 times, from those brothers. This prince actually does not know who in the entire capital has a more simple backyard than Jin Qinwang Fu. Li Hongyuan patiently explained. Prince should understand that this old official did not mean it that way. Lord Luo should just say that this prince's reputation is outside. This prince is only a jinx to his wife, not all women. If this prince is not a jinx to all women, would the backyard of Jin Qinwang Fu be so peaceful? This prince has long known that Wan is a small vinegar jar. Luo Peishan understood, but because he understood, his shock could not be concealed. Li Hongyuan seemed to dislike that the stimulation he gave Luo Peishan was not enough. He looked at him with a faint expression. Until now, this prince has not hugged a woman. Lord Luo, you say, is it easy for this prince? Luo Peishan was immediately stupefied. Was he hallucinating, or was he hallucinating, or was he hallucinating? What happened to the fickle man who had seen countless women? Suddenly turned into a 22-year-old who had not touched a woman and was so pure. Ben Wang painstakingly calculated so much. Isn't it just to marry your precious granddaughter back to warm the bed? Luo Peishan's throat seemed to be stuck, unable to speak for a long time. Actually, he had already fallen asleep, but he had been dreaming. But why was this dream so strange? Quickly wake up, this kind of thing, even if it was a dream, it was disgraceful. Lord Luo doesn't want to say anything. It's quite boring for this prince to talk to himself like this. Luo Peishan fiercely pinched himself. Ouch, it hurts. Lord Luo, for better or for worse, this prince feels pain just looking at you. Damn, it's not a dream. Your Highness, are you keeping your chastity for this old official's granddaughter? What other reason could it be? Your Highness, even if you want to marry this old official's granddaughter, it seems that you don't have to go to this extent. You are a noble prince, the son of His Majesty, and deeply doted on. Not to mention the entire capital, even the entire Qi Yuan's young ladies would be able to marry anyone you set your heart on. It's really hard to believe that you are doing this. Didn't this prince say that if I knew that Wan is a vinegar jar, this prince wants her body, and even more so, her heart? For her, if I can't be with her for the rest of her life, then there's no need to talk about her heart, right? Luo Peishan's lips wriggled for a moment. Your Highness also has an outstanding beauty to be a Ce Fei. The previous 7 princess to be have already been settled. What's a Ce Fei to be? Li Hongyuan was very dismissive. Luo Peishan sucked in a breath of cold air. He thought that at least the point of cursing his wife should be true. He even thought that if his granddaughter was related to him and cursed by him, what should he say? In the end, this was also part of his plan. At that time, he hadn't even met Third Miss, but he had already done this. It should be known that those young ladies were all of noble status. If their families found out that everything was Prince Jin's doing, no matter how much His Majesty doted on him, he would peel off a layer of his skin. Your Highness, by doing this, where is this old official's granddaughter? The position of Prince Jin's consort can only be Wan's. Lord Luo, do you understand? Li Hongyuan's eyes were somewhat gloomy. Ben Wang will definitely pull out any obstacles. Even if there is a crime, it will fall on this one's head. Luo Peishan didn't know what Prince Jin dreamed of. Why did Third Miss have such a big influence on him? However, there was one thing that he could be sure of. In the end, his granddaughter could only marry him. Your Highness, why didn't you say so earlier? Wan's marriage didn't need to be so troublesome. After the engagement, you took the trouble to break it up. Why bother? Ben Wang's reputation is not good. If her reputation is good, can she marry Ben Wang? Your reputation is not good, it's all your own design. Who is to blame? Wan and Ben Wang's status is very different. If Ben Wang's reputation is good, can she marry Ben Wang? The previous part was already very clear. You don't need to make a summary statement. Luo Peishan was completely speechless. He also knew that Luqingdi valued status. Even if she broke off the engagement with Sun Bing by now, there are many people who want to marry her. Is Wang Ye going to let her be engaged a few more times? No, that's not right. If Wang Ye really had such a plan, he wouldn't appear here. Coming to win him over to do things for him, it was just in passing. There are too many people spying on us. So you're jealous? Or are you worried about complications? Wang Ye, it's not to the point where you have no other choice. Why do you want the emperor to agree to you marrying this old official's granddaughter? Ben Wang sits on the throne. Naturally, I don't need to care about whether he agrees or not. His mother, in order to marry his granddaughter, Prince Jin didn't hesitate to rebel. Wan was actually an enchantress who brought disaster to the country, right? For Wang Ye to do this, aren't you worried that the emperor will be sad? This old official thinks that the emperor knows about your private actions. Perhaps, he is even secretly helping you. Are you his designated heir to the throne? Li Hongyuan seemed to have heard the funniest joke. He laughed for a long time. His voice was low, but there wasn't the slightest bit of joy. Instead, it was sinister and terrifying. If he knew, he would probably eliminate Ben Wang at all costs. Impossible, Luo Peishan subconsciously retorted. The emperor's love for Prince Jin wasn't fake. Why else would it be called unpredictable? In a flash, there was a smile that was particularly bewitching. Luo Darren, let me tell you a secret. This secret, other than Ben Wang, only Fu Wang and Gue Fei Su know. Do you want to hear it? Luo Peishan only felt a chill run down his back. This level of secret, knowing it would be harmful. Presumably, this is Wang Ye's family matter. This old official doesn't need to know. He already knew too much tonight. So much that he was completely in the palm of this future grandson-in-law's hand. However, no matter what, he was willing to do it. However, the one he was facing was Li Hongyuan. Whether he said it or not, it was Li Hongyuan's. He had no choice but to listen. As for this prince, I am a true devil. Luo Peishan abruptly raised his head to look at Li Hongyuan. How was that possible? The so-called devil was someone born on the 15th of the 7th month. But for Prince Jin's birthday, although he didn't know which day it was, it definitely wasn't in the 7th month. And the other situation was, a child born from a dead person. He heard that Prince Jin's birth mother seemed to have died from postpartum hemorrhage. Then, where did the devil come from? Li Hongyuan was full of smiles. Ben Wang was personally cut out by Fu Huang from Mu Fei's belly, who had already stopped breathing. Luo Peishan only felt that Li Hongyuan's smile was even more terrifying than his usual sinister and ruthless expression. Devils were seen as inauspicious. If that was the case, it was already good that Lu Qingdi was able to keep his life. The throne, even if Lu Qingdi only had one son, Li Hongyuan, he would rather adopt a successor than pass it on to him. Secretly helping him cultivate power, sure enough, it was the biggest joke. Because he felt guilty towards his most beloved woman, when that woman cried out for a child on her deathbed, he cut out the devil's child. Because he wanted compensation, as the devil's son, as long as it didn't cross his bottom line, he could ask for anything. Luo Darren, do you know how his most beloved woman died? Facing Li Hongyuan's calm and unruffled attitude, Luo Peishan only wanted to plug his ears or find a place to completely hide. It would be best if he couldn't hear anyone's voice. Li Hongyuan laughed sinisterly and viciously. She was strangled to death by his own hands. He ruthlessly choked that slender and fragile neck, as if he was facing an enemy with a deep blood feud. Even people could hear the sound of bones dislocating. Luo Peishan's mouth twitched somewhat stiffly. To be honest, he didn't believe that Lu Qingdi was someone who would do such a ruthless thing. However, Jin Qinhuang didn't seem to have any need to lie about this kind of thing. The question came again, how did he know about this matter? He just said that other than him, only Lu Qingdi and Gue Fei Su knew about it. It couldn't be Lu Qingdi who told him, so it could only be Gue Fei Su. But under what circumstances did Gue Fei Su tell him? It was reasonable to say that the only person who knew about it other than Lu Qingdi should have kept this secret forever in her stomach. Because once it was known, Lu Qingdi would immediately take her life, even if she was the so-called Gue Fei Su who was the most favored in the harem. However, Luo Peishan wouldn't foolishly ask for the root of the matter. Tonight's stimulation was too much, his old heart was almost unable to bear it. However, Li Hongyuan probably felt that it was enough. He stood up, Ben Wang's brothers, Luo Darren doesn't need to trouble yourself to deal with them. Take control of the Ministry of Personnel as soon as possible. In the face of Li Hongming, if you don't take the initiative to find him, he probably won't lower himself to curry favor with you. As for Li Hongming, it's fine to do business as usual. As for the others, you don't need to care about them. The Gong Qin Wang. Him. Li Hongyuan sneered, the left governor is Ben Wang's man. The Gong Qin Wang's biggest reliance was his father-in-law, the left governor Qin Tianming. The result, I'm afraid he's even worse than the other princes with maternal families. The imperial court was indeed a tripartite balance of power, but the third one wasn't the Gong Qin Wang who was slightly weaker, but Jin Qin Wang, who could be said to be the most powerful one. Chapter 127. Luo Peishan expressed his pity for the Gong Prince. Li Hongyuan seemed to have seen through Luo Peishan's thoughts. Luo Darren can still take pity on Li Hongyi. After all, in his eyes, Qin Tianming is loyal to him. This is probably one of the few things he can be proud of. Luo Peishan was silent. On the surface, he was suppressed by this person, so he could only take a detour. In the dark, he was also poached, schemed against, and framed, but he couldn't find the real culprit, so he was fiercely fighting with others. Each and every one of them was sharpening their swords, preparing to deal with this person after ascending the throne. But they didn't know that they were all played in the palm of his hand. In his eyes, they were like jumping clowns. Thinking back to before, no, Wang Ye, this old official's granddaughter fell off the cliff at White Dragon Temple, was it also your doing? That was an accident, although it was an accident made by Ruan Fangfei, Wan Wan and the others were only implicated. How could Ben Wang joke with Wan Wan's life? The assassination was indeed prepared, but it happened to be Wan Wan's accident, so it was brought forward. Luo Peishan choked on a mouthful of old blood. You really can use everything to scheme against me. What unexpected saving grace! It was clearly a trick put on by this living king of hell, deliberately letting the third girl spend a night alone with him. If he really had his eyes on Wan Wan, according to this person's bad conduct, nothing happened. Luo Peishan wouldn't believe it even if he died. At most, it will be a kiss and a hug. Before the wedding, Ben Wang won't let Wan Wan lose her virginity. Then I really have to thank Wang Ye. Luo Peishan said through gritted teeth. We're family, you're welcome. Li Hongyuan said shamelessly. Who the fuck is your family? I can't afford it. Luo Peishan finally understood Lu Qingdi's mood when he was enraged by this king of hell. He really wanted to beat him up. Taking advantage of his good granddaughter, he still dared to say such shameless words. His skin was even thicker than those old foxes who had been in the government for decades. Farewell, Your Highness. It's getting dark, so Your Highness, please be careful of your steps. If one walked too much at night, one might bump into ghosts. Li Hongyuan nodded. Can I take it that Lord Luo is showing concern for his future grandson-in-law? Luo Peishan responded with 2 sneers. Fortunately, Li Hongyuan didn't know that he had sent people to Qi and Prefecture's Luo family several years ago. He also didn't know that the most trusted person by Jingwan's side was once his people. In addition, he had many spies in the Luo family, both in the open and in the dark. If Luo Peishan knew about this, he might really be so angry that he would vomit blood. Li Hongyuan was too thick-skinned, so he didn't think much of it. Someone who was standing guard outside quickly came in and respectfully handed over a booklet. She didn't hear anything about her master being a Japanese, but the emperor strangling her master's mother to death was like a gust of wind in her ears. The risk of being valued was too great. Should she consider exchanging with someone else next time? Li Hongyuan took it and casually handed it to Luo Peishan. Lord Luo, take a look. It'll be helpful for you to control the Ministry of Personnel. Although Luo Peishan was furious, he didn't refuse this kindness. Lord Luo only needs to manage the Ministry of Personnel's affairs. You don't need to do anything else, including Jingwan's marriage. When the time comes, just let nature take its course and cancel it. Luo Peishan watched as Li Hongyuan quickly disappeared into the night. He couldn't help but think of 2 people, Chen Zhengmin and Sun Yilan. In the past, he was still picking on them for snatching away his good grandson. But now, he was full of sympathy for them. It was said that people were shrewd with age. How could he not see that they had fallen in love with his good grandson? Originally, to be able to get engaged with the girl he liked was already considered to have fulfilled his wish. He only needed to wait for 1 or 2 years to complete the last step. But just as he was feeling proud of his success, a bolt from the blue came. Think of Chen Jingmin, the grand scholar and the third scholar. In the end, he wasn't happy at all. If he didn't get over it, his future might even be delayed. In a situation where he didn't know the truth, he only thought that his luck was bad. But after knowing the truth, his luck was indeed very bad. Being regarded as a thorn in the flesh by the king of hell wasn't just bad luck from 8 lifetimes. There was also Sun Yilan. Originally, there was no hope. But now, he had regained what he lost. Unfortunately, he didn't know that this was just an illusion. His happy marriage was actually a paving stone for someone else's fate. Right now, he might still be happy, but who knows when his joy would turn to sorrow. Luo Peishan now felt particularly sorry for them. In fact, they were all good children. It was just that their hearts fell in love with someone they shouldn't have. If they didn't fall in love with third girl, perhaps they wouldn't. No, this admiration hurt the heart. If it wasn't admiration, they might not be able to escape unscathed. My family's girl is so good, why don't you put it in your heart? Luo Peishan believed that he had this kind of mentality. Standing from the perspective of the king of hell who never acted according to common sense, he might think that the person that Ben Wang could fancy, you guys actually didn't fancy. This final outcome might not be any better than not admiring. Perhaps it was even more miserable. In short, as long as it was a paving stone chosen by the king of hell, then it was an unlucky person. In Luo Peishan's opinion, Jin Qinhuang should have prepared at least 2 more people. And according to the standards of the previous 2, he was afraid that they were all first-class young talents. It should be said that Jin Qinhuang really had deep feelings for his own good grandson. The people he chose were all the objects of admiration of countless women in the boudoir. This stepping stone had to be chosen to be the most outstanding. Really, he couldn't help but be convinced. Although, in fact, Jingwan's 2 marriages, the men were chosen by themselves. But, if a certain person wasn't satisfied, then he was afraid that before the engagement, it would be ruined. Sigh, Luo Peishan collected his drifting thoughts and returned to the desk before slowly opening the booklet. On it were some matters of the Ministry of Personnel. The more Luo Peishan read, the more alarmed he became. In this Ministry of Personnel, at least half of the people were loyal to Jin Qinhuang. From top to bottom, there were people in charge of all aspects. It could be said that although Jin Qinhuang wasn't in the Ministry of Personnel, but the situation in the Ministry of Personnel, no one could be clearer than him. Thus, even if they were loyal to the same master, they might not know each other's secret identities. At this moment, Luo Peishan felt pity for Prince Rui. He had been in the Ministry of Personnel for nearly a year and had spent countless efforts. The result was that it didn't reach his expectations. More than half of the people he roped in were Jin Qinhuang's people. How was this assistance? It was clearly destructive. He would never be able to obtain the most real thing. Everything he knew was 90% true and 1 false. False things weren't usually obvious, but at crucial times, any bit of wrong information could cause failure. If the Ministry of Personnel was like this, then what about other places? Luo Peishan didn't believe that he hadn't interfered. However, Luo Peishan was becoming more and more fearful of Li Hongyuan's methods. Without any advantage, without anyone's support, he was able to reach this point alone. This was too frightening. To make an enemy out of this person, even if one had heaven-defying luck, they might not necessarily be able to compete with him. Moreover, for him to be able to reach this point, his luck certainly wasn't bad. He took advantage of the right time and place, and forcefully reversed the harmony of people. It could be said that he was invincible. Prince Rui, who he thought was pretty good before, was instantly reduced to dregs by Jin Qinhuang. He was afraid that even if they joined forces, they still wouldn't be able to compete with him. If he had Luqing Emperor's support, perhaps he would already be the rightful crown prince. What a pity, the devil. It was just that, misfortune may be a blessing in disguise. If Jin Qinhuang's birth mother was still alive, he would be the true son of heaven, pampered by his parents, flattered by all kinds of people around him. Then, perhaps he would be far from his current achievements. Luo Peishan silently burned the booklet. His own good grandson, would she really marry such a man in the future? And would such a man really guard a woman for a lifetime? It was said that the best was what couldn't be obtained. Wan wasn't married to him now, so he schemed, so he could guard her. But in the future, after he got what he wanted, perhaps that love from the dream would fade little by little. He would become like the other emperors, with a harem of 3,000 beauties. Luo Peishan softly sighed. Facing this one, he could only do whatever he said, there was no room for resistance. However, Jin Qinhuang, this person, was forbearing and flamboyant. This kind of person often kept his word. Whatever he said, he could basically do. Perhaps that good grandson of his really had this kind of luck. Luo Peishan thought through this and gradually put down his worries. Besides, it was already set in stone, there was no use for him to worry now. As for the taboo of the devil, Luo Peishan didn't care at all. Seeing that the booklet had completely turned to ashes, his manservant hurriedly came in and knelt down with a plop. It's been so long, where have you been? Luo Peishan asked without batting an eyelid. Leoi, this one accidentally fell asleep, this one deserves to die, this one, alright, get up. It's getting late, go prepare and rest. Yes. Most likely, he didn't fall asleep, but was drugged. The next day, because there was no morning court, Luo Peishan directly went to the Ministry of Personnel Yamen. Along the way, many people saw that he was calm and composed, without the slightest bit of melancholy. Was it really so, or was it a forced act? In fact, they could more or less see it. Thus, many people looked at each other in dismay. What was going on? Yesterday, after the morning court, they could clearly feel that when he saw Li Hongming, the other party smiled at him. Luo Peishan smiled even more sincerely. When Li Hongming asked him to take care of him, Luo Peishan's witty words were even more slippery. Li Hongming's face was still smiling, but in his heart, he wasn't so happy. What was going on? Could it be that without him knowing, Li Hongming's side made a move? Not only did they resolve the misunderstanding, but their relationship also quickly became harmonious in a short period of time. Chapter 128. Could Luo Peishan's control of the Ministry of Personnel be hindered or even stopped by multiple obstacles? Not to mention Luo Peishan's own abilities, just the fact that he had such a prospective grandson-in-law was like a cheat code. He already had a good grasp of the entire situation in the Ministry of Personnel Affairs. Did you think that he wouldn't know anything just because his subordinates refused to answer him when he asked about something? It didn't matter if they didn't tell him. Luo Peishan was happy and didn't express anything. He would give him 2 days to slowly familiarize himself with the situation. When the time came, they wouldn't say that he was a new official who made drastic changes. It would be too painful for them to burn their own heads. However, there were a few people who felt that the way their superior looked at them was strange, as if there was a hidden meaning in his gaze. There were those who were upright and plain-spoken and were very calm. However, there were also those who had ulterior motives. They couldn't help but wonder if their secret had been discovered. In short, it was very annoying. Luo Peishan didn't think much of it. It was just that these people were all very good at acting. They were showing off their skills for their respective masters, but in reality, thinking back, sometimes they were just trying to trick their masters. This was a good way to gain enmity. As expected, none of the officials were simple. There was another person who wasn't very comfortable. That was Luo Peishan's eldest son-in-law, Yuan Chaochao's father. Originally, if his father-in-law was his superior, he would be doing better. However, he was on Prince Rui's side. He had once wanted to pull his father-in-law to Prince Rui's side, but he didn't succeed. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, he rarely visited the Luo family. Previously, his mother-in-law wasn't around and his wife rarely returned home. But now, his situation had become awkward. The most obvious point was that Prince Rui had distanced himself from him after the former minister of the Ministry of Personnel resigned. Luo Peishan spent half a day in the Ministry of Personnel Yamen, and he was very relaxed and happy. Luo Peishan's attitude was even more unfathomable. After a day, he should have felt the rejection of the entire Ministry of Personnel Yamen. He didn't panic at all. Was he really so calm? Or did he give up because he knew that he was in an awkward position? Prince Kong, who had been reprimanded by the Empress, reluctantly put down his dignity and came to Luo Peishan. Unfortunately, he was not sincere. He only said a few perfunctory words, but Luo Peishan also gave him a perfunctory answer. Prince Kong was furious. In his opinion, Luo Peishan was disloyal to him first. Now that he was willing to use him, he was giving him a lot of face. He should be showing his loyalty to him in fear and trepidation. In the end, Imperial Mother said that Lord Luo is a person who values relationships and family. Now it seems that it is not entirely true. Lord Luo is the same as most people. No, that's not right. He is far inferior to them. At least they will think about whether their daughters will have a good life in their in-laws' house. Luo Peishan smiled, but there was a bone-chilling coldness in his eyes. According to Your Highness, this old official's granddaughter hasn't entered the gate of Ding General Manor yet, but you are already planning to make her unhappy, just like your aunt. It is said that nephews resemble their uncles. In your opinion, is this nephews resemble their aunts? These words were vicious. To put it lightly, Prince Kang's behavior was like that of a woman. To put it more seriously, he suspected Prince Kang's biological mother, or even that he was the son of the empress who had stolen the dragon and was not Emperor Luqingdi's son. Luo Peishan, Prince Kong directly waved his fist at Luo Peishan. Fortunately, the person next to him reacted quickly and stopped him. Otherwise, this punch would have hit Luo Peishan. He was already so old. Who knew what kind of punishment he would suffer? It was possible that he would never be able to get up again. Luo Peishan's face became completely cold, and Prince Kang's face was even more livid. Lord Luo, as expected of Lord Luo, Prince Kong flicked his sleeves and left. This time, he probably wouldn't put down his face to ask for peace anymore. And the words, nephews resemble their aunts, quickly spread. It must be said that this Lord Luo was really not an ordinary kind of daring. However, even more people felt that Lord Luo was speaking the truth. Even if you are a Wang Ye, if you want to rope someone in, it's fine if you don't have a bit of sincerity. But the other person's granddaughter hasn't married yet and you're already threatening him. Isn't that the same as your aunts? This kind of words, unless someone deliberately said it, otherwise it wouldn't reach Emperor Luqingdi's ears. But it was different for other people. After Li Hongyuan, who was holed up in Jin Qin Wang Fu, heard this, he declined to comment on Luo Peishan's words. Regardless of whether he had one layer of meaning or two layers of meaning, when it involved Wan, how could he let Li Hongyi off so easily? Therefore, it could be said that Prince Kong would encounter another unknown misfortune. And when the servant came to report, Li Hongming, who had just made a round at the Ministry of Personnel Yamen before returning to his fu, was currently holding a soft and warm jade in his arms. It wasn't anyone else, it was Luo Jingying. Dressed in luxurious clothes, her entire body was adorned with expensive jewelry. Leaning in Li Hongming's arms, the most important thing was that the corners of her eyes were bewitching. Her appearance, if a discerning person saw it, they would definitely be able to guess what had happened. Luo Jingying had already lost her chastity. Li Hongming saw a personal attendant not far away and gently whispered a few words in Luo Jingying's ear. Under Luo Jingying's affectionate gaze, Li Hongming got up and left. What is it? That personal attendant told Li Hongming the words that came in from outside in full detail. Nephews resemble their aunts. Li Hongming smiled very playfully. That idiot probably didn't even think of the second layer of meaning. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given up so easily. Unfortunately, there's nothing to do about this. But Li Hongyi has pushed Luo Peishan even further, which is a great thing for this prince. Li Hongming glanced at Luo Jingying. Because the two of them had the most intimate relationship, Luo Jingying no longer concealed the look in her eyes. Li Hongming smiled gently on the surface, but in his heart, Luo Jingying was no different from a prostitute in a brothel. She was a good girl, but she learned the art of sex. She was really not the ordinary kind of cheap. So, this was how men were. They had clearly enjoyed it, but they felt that the girl was not chaste enough. You may leave. As for Luo Peishan, there was no need to call him in immediately. It still needed a gradual process. It would be best if Luo Peishan struggled for a while and realized that he couldn't control the Ministry of Personnel. It wouldn't be too late to reach out then. Then, he could watch Li Hongyi continue to act. Before Li Hongyuan could turn around, another attendant came to report, Your Highness, the princess consort and concubine Wu came by just now. They only stood for a while before leaving. Don't worry about it. Li Hongming was very confident in his own inner court. Everyone was very tactful about what they should do and what they shouldn't do. However, after spending half a day on Luo Jingying, he felt that it was a waste of time. Li Hongming walked to Luo Jingying's side and sat down. Luo Jingying naturally snuggled into his arms. Li Hongming touched her face and said gently, this prince will have someone send you back. Luo Jingying was stunned, but I don't want to leave. I can't bear to part with your highness. This prince also can't bear to part with you, but if you go back late and your family finds out, what will you do? Does your highness not want this concubine, this subject's family to know? She looked up at Li Hongming and was about to cry. Li Hongming hurriedly kissed her eyes. Of course, but this prince doesn't want Ing's reputation to be damaged. This prince wants to enter the Jin Wangfu openly. Give this prince some time. This prince will definitely let enter the Rui Wangfu openly. Luo Jingying changed back to her original clothes with the help of the maidservants. Although she didn't change out of her undergarments, Luo Jingying still felt that the original clothes were not right. She couldn't help but look at the magnificent clothes. When could she wear it openly? However, she didn't think about it. Even if she entered the Rui Wangfu and Li Hongming gave her the title of concubine, she would only be a concubine. She wouldn't even have the right to return home. Without Rui Wangfei, she wouldn't even be able to leave the second door of the Rui Wangfu. How could she wear it out to show off? Before entering the Rui Wangfu, she wouldn't have the guts to wear it even if Li Hongming gave her a lot of good cloth. She didn't know if there was a hole in her brain. The servant girl who served her was unusually respectful, but in her heart, she was extremely disdainful of her. She had never seen such a short-sighted person, nor had she seen such a shameless person. In fact, the maidservants in the Rui Wangfu rarely thought of climbing into the bed. Because anyone who knew Li Hongming's true temperament knew that even if they succeeded, they wouldn't have the glory and wealth they dreamed of. So, what was the difference between a good official's daughter and a prostitute doing this kind of thing? It was said that she was the granddaughter of the new minister of the Ministry of Official Personnel Affairs. The Luo family was a scholarly family with a century-old reputation. If he knew that he had such a disgraceful granddaughter, would he beat her to death directly? Luo Jingying quietly returned to the mansion from the back door. The old maidservant who guarded the door finally felt relieved. It was not a good thing for a girl to go out secretly. If it was known, she would be the first one who couldn't escape. Luo Jingying's etiquette instructor calmly took over the big bag in Luo Jingying's hand. It was not light. When Luo Jingying went out, she was empty-handed. This was a big gain. She turned around and was about to take Luo Jingying back to the third branch. The old maidservant who guarded the door grabbed her, but we agreed that it would be just this once. If she hadn't been caught by the old woman, she wouldn't have dared to do such a thing. The etiquette instructor pushed her hand away, took out a silver ingot worth 10 taels from her sleeve and threw it to her. "I'll bother you next time." The old maidservant was so angry that her liver hurt. However, she really didn't dare to expose it. Luo Jingying saw this but didn't say anything. The etiquette instructor took Luo Jingying to a secluded place and took a big detour before returning to the third branch. Fortunately, they didn't meet anyone along the way. Luo Jingying immediately relaxed. "Fourth sister, what are you wearing? Did you come back from outside?" Luo Jingying was shocked when she suddenly heard Jingwan's voice. She felt guilty and scared. "Luo Jingwan, why are you here?" "Fourth sister, how can you call your older sister by her name?" Sun Yijia looked at Luo Jingying and said unhappily. Luo Jingying was anxious and angry. Perhaps Sun Yijia had a deep influence on her in the past, so she didn't dare to refute. "This servant greets third young madam and third young Mississippi, fourth young miss." Jingwan waved her hand. "Third sister-in-law, let's go." Obviously, she didn't want to listen to their nonsense. After Jingwan and Sun Yijia walked away, why did they come to the third branch? Chapter 129. You're getting married tomorrow. Luo Jingying was startled. She had completely forgotten about this. However, Luo Jingying felt that she couldn't be blamed for this. It was because the residence was too quiet. If it was as lively as her third brother's wedding, even the dead would know about it. She couldn't help but sneer. "She's just a bastard born of a concubine. Naturally, she's not worthy of our attention. Miss, you should go back and change your clothes first. We still need to add some dowry to second Mrs. Dowry." Luo Jingying walked towards her courtyard. "Nanny, just pick something and send it over. She doesn't have the face to make this miss go personally." Her good mood was half ruined because she saw someone she hated. However, after opening the bundle and seeing the good things she dreamed of, Luo Jingying couldn't help but smile happily. Her etiquette instructor stood silently to the side. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't moved by those good things. However, she was an old person after all. Her desire for these things was very weak. The only thing she wanted now was to see the Lu family return to its former glory. She didn't say anything in the face of open-minded and brainless Luo Jingying. In any case, it seemed that her body was already ruined. Even if third miss suspected that she had gone out and informed old madam, the matter was already settled. As long as she was still valuable to Prince Rui wouldn't sit idly by. On the other side, Jingwan and Sun Yijia were walking hand in hand. "Little sister Wan, fourth sister doesn't seem to be right." Sun Yijia frowned slightly and was somewhat worried. Of course, she wasn't worried about Luo Jingying herself. As the saying goes, if one person prospers, the whole family prospers, and if one person suffers, the whole family suffers. If something happened to Luo Jingying, the one who would be implicated would be the young lady of the Luo family, and even the entire Luo family. As for Luo Jingying, there was nothing worth paying attention to. Not to mention, Sun Yijia had seen plenty of people like her. As for the grudge between her and Wan Jingying, she already understood most of it. To be honest, the origin of the conflict was simply inexplicable and unreasonable. Jingwan, on the other hand, didn't care that much. Sun Yijia might not know what Luo Jingying did, but she had a pretty good guess. Perhaps she hadn't personally experienced it, but in her opinion, it was simply vulgar for a lady of the boudoir to sneak out wearing a maid's clothes. There was a 99% chance that she was meeting her lover. He had no idea who the other party was. Just tell grandmother. We don't need to care about this kind of thing. Third Miss Luo was very relaxed now. Although, after careful consideration, it should be possible to roughly guess Luo Jingying's date. There were only a few people who could catch the eye of the arrogant Luo Jingying and dare to reach out to her. You're right. We don't need to care about it. Sun Yijia smiled. Today, Wang Jingying seemed to have changed a little. She seemed to be more casual. She couldn't help but think of what old madam said when she rushed to the flower garden yesterday. This small change should be a good thing. Jingwan didn't even tell old Madame Luo personally. She just casually sent a maid. After that, she didn't hear anything else. However, important guests came to the house. Yesterday, before she left the flower garden, her grandfather had already told her that a few shameless people would come to admire the flowers today. Of course, this adjective was summed up by Jingwan. Her grandfather didn't say it so directly, but it was the meaning behind his words. Thus, without saying anything, she directly asked the servants to carry the tricolor peony to the front yard. The servants by Luo Peishan's side came back. This was almost within Jingwan's expectations. According to the degree of those people's infatuation, as long as it was a rare and famous item, they would probably be fascinated by it and say hundreds and thousands of words of praise. Therefore, she waved her hand and asked them to move the other flowers, including Imolan, away. However, Jingwan didn't expect that her grandfather's people would come for the third time. This time, they didn't come to move the flowers, but brought a person. A very unexpected person, the lotus flower that rose out of the water Wan Fangfei. It had to be said that when she saw the gentle and moving smile of Wan Fangfei, Jingwan didn't even know what expression to put on for a moment. She had already suspected that this was a deeply hidden pervert. However, through some side understanding from Sun Yijia, Wan Fangfei shouldn't be the same as her. It seemed that there were no signs of rebirth. After all, her intelligence and elegance had always been within the scope of a woman in the boudoir. If she really was reborn, she should be thinking of ways to influence the situation outside the inner residence. In a situation where outsiders didn't know, she was imperceptibly influencing Wan Ruizhong. No, although Jingwan had only met Wan Ruizhong once or twice, but from the information she got from her grandfather, Luo Peishan, she could basically infer that Wan Ruizhong was actually a very male chauvinist person. If it was only a small matter, he wouldn't care, but if it involved the imperial court, 8 or 9 times out of 10, he wouldn't talk about it in the inner residence. As a person who didn't transmigrate or rebirth, a girl in the inner residence, even if she was vicious and scheming, she could still find the source. But where did this pervert come from? Although it was possible that some people were really born with some mental illness, the fact was that the influence of the day after birth was greater, wasn't it? Wan Fangfei touched her face in confusion. Third Miss Luo is looking at me like this. Is there something on my face? Jingwan lightly hooked her lips and joked, it's just that I was bewitched by the sudden appearance of a beauty. Wan Fangfei probably didn't expect that Jingwan would speak like a lecher to tease her, and her expression was clearly a little confused. Younger sister Wan, your mouth is still so sweet that it makes people want to pinch you. Wan Fangfei turned around and saw that the seemingly arrogant Sun Yijia didn't put on any makeup, but her complexion was rosy and her brows were relaxed. It was obvious that she wasn't as cold as before, and it could be seen that she was living a good life. The more noble the status of a woman in the boudoir, after marriage, there weren't many who could be more comfortable than in the boudoir. It should be said that 99% of women were like this, not to mention that Sun Yijia's face was disfigured, but she was living a better life than in the boudoir. It was really 1 in a million. It really made people jealous. "Hello, third young mistress Luo." "Hello, Miss Ruan." Sun Yijia calmly accepted the title of other people's child in the past, and even returned a rare smile. In fact, even if there was such a hideous scar on her face, Sun Yijia's charm wasn't damaged at all. Sun Yijia walked to Jingwan's side and reached out to pinch her face. "Your mouth." "Miss Ruan, don't mind it. Younger sister Wan is like this, and our family can't do anything to her." Jingwan looked at Sun Yijia with dissatisfaction. "I'm telling the truth. It said that everyone loves beauty. I was just entranced by a great beauty. What did I do wrong?" Ruan Fangfei covered her mouth and laughed. For women, praise from another woman would probably please them even more. Moreover, with Ruan Fangfei's status, even if there were many men who admired her, their praise would only be tactful. However, those things, after hearing too much, there would always be a time when one would feel tired of it. This was the first time such a straightforward praise had been given. Even Ruan Fangfei couldn't help but feel happy from the bottom of her heart. Well, for such an interesting person, wouldn't it be better to keep him alive and slowly deal with him? Just like the butterfly in the net, flying and struggling, it was so interesting. It was much better than slapping him to death. Jingwan inadvertently glanced at Ruan Fangfei's eyes. Because she was covering her mouth and nose, her eyes were particularly prominent. People who didn't notice anything might think that it was particularly beautiful and shiny like a gem, but Jingwan felt that it was particularly scary. He couldn't help but want to swear, "Okay." Jingwan never liked to let unimportant people into her room unless it was a special situation. Similarly, she asked people to prepare the things and sat in the yard to chat. Because there were outsiders, Sun Yijia was still used to looking at her arrogantly. However, when she talked to Jingwan, she would involuntarily soften. Jingwan was used to it, but Ruan Fangfei felt it was particularly obvious. No matter what, people like her had a common problem, which was to think that everyone should revolve around her. If someone's attitude towards everyone was the same, it would be better. However, if this person suddenly treated another person differently, and that person was not her, she would feel unhappy. In particular, these two people's attitudes were particularly intimate. Because the age difference between Sun Yijia and Ruan Fangfei was very small, and the education they received since childhood was similar, it was reasonable to say that these two people should dislike each other and sympathize with each other from a certain point of view. However, when they really sat together, Jingwan found that their auras didn't match at all. It seemed that they didn't have any desire to chat. Therefore, Ruan Fangfei pulled Jingwan to talk about flowers and trees, and Sun Yijia pulled her to talk about other things. The more they talked, the more uncomfortable it was. It was like two children competing for favor, and Jingwan obviously became the object of their competition. Jingwan dealt with it calmly, but she couldn't help but roll her eyes in her heart. These two people didn't compete in the past because they rarely got together. After this battle, their views of each other in their hearts would change. It wasn't difficult for Rui Ran to deal with two people who suddenly became childish, but after a long time, she would still feel mentally tired. Speaking of which, it was Sun Yijia who was close to her that was the first to notice the trouble she brought to Jingwan. Therefore, she took the initiative to restrain herself and slowly became silent. Her family was still the only family that felt heartache. "Young lady, master sent a message saying that it's time to go back," Ruan Fangfei's mama said. Ruan Fangfei looked at the sky. So much time has passed without us noticing. I wanted to talk to young lady Luo before, but I didn't have the chance. Fortunately, I came with my father today, otherwise I would have missed it. Young Lady Luo, how about we go out for a walk in a few days' time? She looked at Jingwan rather hopefully. Jingwan smiled, sure. After sending Wan Fangfei off, Sun Yijia frowned. What exactly did she come here for? Who knows? Chapter 130. Who knows? In short, it was not just because she was bored at home and followed her old man to the Luo family for a stroll. Then, the real purpose of Wan Fangfei coming here was worth pondering. Jingwan felt that she most likely came for her. Coming to this conclusion, Jingwan's entire person felt a little unwell. How should it be said, Jingwan had always been puzzled. How could she be inexplicably targeted by a pervert? Originally, she was prepared to consciously avoid her, but she actually still came to find her home. Wan Mimi, I always feel that Wan Fangfei is strange somewhere. I had little contact with her in the past, but it's not like I didn't have any contact with her. I don't seem to have this kind of feeling. Sun Yijia was somewhat puzzled. Jingwan glanced at her. Of course, you weren't targeted by her in the past. Now, the reason why perverts were called perverts was because those people's brain circuits were different from ordinary people. However, she roughly knew the reason why Wan Fangfei targeted her sister-in-law. It was nothing more than a certain kind of strange idea similar to Lucia she couldn't bear to see others doing well. The time Sun Yijia married into the Luo family was originally the time of her marriage with Jin Qin Wang. As Jin Qin Wang's prospective Cifei, Wan Fangfei should have married into Jin Qin Wang Fu not long after. However, this specific time had not been set from the beginning. Jingwan got the news from her grandfather Luo Peishan. It seemed that there was no movement at all. It was as if Lu Qingdi had simply forgotten that he had bestowed such a marriage. It was as if the time of Wan Fangfei's marriage had been deliberately delayed, and there was a bit of an endless delay. Wan Fangfei looked indifferent. Was she anxious in her heart? She was definitely anxious. Without Sun Yijia, she was still a prospective Cifei, but she still couldn't marry over. That was the man she had longed for a long time. It was clearly just a step away, and she could legitimately get close to him. But in her eyes, it should be a very easy step, but she always felt that it was abnormally difficult. What exactly was the problem? Why was it deliberately delayed? No one would believe such an excuse as not marrying into the family. If he really wanted to, wouldn't it be better for her to marry him as his consort? She was very clear that the problem did not lie with Lu Qing Emperor, nor would it be with Su Guifei. The marriage was already a foregone conclusion, so the Empress could not possibly disturb it. After thinking about it, the reason could only be Jin Qin Wang himself. Perhaps he was dissatisfied with what he had done in the past. He wouldn't. He wasn't someone who would care about such things. She had unparalleled talent and beauty. She would be the best wife for him. She had always cared about her, hadn't she? In that case, there must be some other reason. He just didn't think of it. Wan Fangfei wanted to personally ask Li Hongyuan. However, she never had a chance to see him. She wanted to go directly to Jin Wangfu, but if she really went, she could forget about keeping her good reputation. If Li Hongyuan knew what Wan Fangfei was thinking, he would probably ignore her completely. He was now looking for an opportunity to get rid of her. However, Wan Fangfei was very good at using all kinds of methods to ruin people. If the same method was used on her, it wouldn't be so easy. Moreover, there weren't many opportunities recently. And, if Jingwan knew, she would probably be very speechless. Jin Qin Wang, this kind of person, had met many talented and beautiful women. You, Wan Fangfei, were better than them only because of your birth. How narcissistic would you be to have this kind of thinking? Whether she blames you or not, it has nothing to do with you. This sister-in-law of hers, in her eyes, should only be incidental. There was her, this eyesore, in front of her. That's right. After her marriage with Jin Qinhuang was annulled, it naturally had nothing to do with Jin Qinhuang's quasi-zife. Moreover, she had settled down now, so why should she care about her? That's right. Sun Yijia leaned closer to Jingwan, smiling somewhat maliciously. My fifth gu also came today. Jingwan smiled rather helplessly. Your fifth gu is the same as the other Darren. They are all people who love flowers. Is it strange that he came? Her skin was so thick. What was this bit of teasing considered? Sun Yijia looked at her with a smile. She wanted to pretend that she didn't understand and muddle through. Fine. Wan Mimi, after you marry my fifth gu, how should we address each other? You call me sister-in-law, and I also call you sister-in-law. It's still early. Jia Jijia can call me whatever you want. Jia Jijia. Since I married into the Luo family, you haven't called me that. Is this a hint? You can think whatever you want. Sun Yijia suddenly reached out to touch her face, with a bit of worry and pity. You and my fifth gu, to me, are both very important. If you two walk together, it would naturally be very good. However, to be honest, after becoming a member of the Luo family, I don't approve of you marrying my fifth gu that much, especially after my mother's actions. Wan Mimi, if she really wants to make things difficult for you, you will have a hard time living under her. In the past, I took it for granted. Because I was used to it, because there was no comparison, and because my mother also avoided me for some things, I thought that being her daughter-in-law was actually nothing. After marrying into the Luo family for a few days, I don't want to enter the inner courtyard anymore. That place is like what you said, a dragon's pool and a tiger's den. To have you trapped there for a lifetime, I feel uncomfortable just thinking about it. Why did you suddenly mention this out of nowhere? In fact, when you were discussing the marriage with my fifth gu, I wanted you to reject this marriage. However, such a big matter is not something that I can blindly meddle in. Moreover, you have always had your own ideas. You naturally agreed to it for your own reasons. However, there are some things that I feel really uncomfortable keeping in my heart. I don't feel good if I don't say it out loud. Anyway, Wan Mimi, you also have feelings for my fifth gu. If it's possible, you should cancel this marriage. Jingwan looked at her in surprise. This change in attitude was a little too fast. Just now, they were still talking about the issue of how to address each other in the future. In the blink of an eye, she was asking her to cancel the marriage. You really think so? Sun Yijia nodded very firmly. After all, a girl can't compare to a man. Marriage is like a second reincarnation. It's really too important. If a man doesn't like his wife, he will take in a concubine. If he doesn't like one, he will take in another one. As for a girl, if she doesn't like her, she can only sulk. Even if my fifth gu doesn't get what he wants, as time passes, it will slowly fade away. It won't have too much of an impact. However, I also know that there are some things that I can only say verbally. If others find out that I urged you to cancel the marriage, I will definitely be scolded in all kinds of ways. Especially fifth gu. He will definitely hate me for the rest of his life. Jingwan couldn't help laughing. She picked up a small snack the size of a fingertip and stuffed it into Sun Yijia's mouth. You're the only one who worries about nothing. Sun Yijia almost choked. She covered her mouth and swallowed the snack with great difficulty. She was rather indignant. Who am I doing this for? Yes, yes, yes. For me, for me. I appreciate your kindness. Don't worry about me. I have to live my life. I'm not a pushover. If I really get bullied, I won't be a punching bag forever. One had to know that her fighting prowess was forced out of her. She might not be good at otaku fighting now, but she had seen countless girls who were as innocent as a piece of white paper. After entering the palace, they could become masters of palace fighting. Even a rabbit would bite if it was forced into a corner. If she was forced into a corner, she would also turn evil. She might have looked down on herself before. She should treat herself better. She should learn from Wang. It would be best to let the people who made her unhappy die of sullenness. In the future, even if her husband was dissolute and unfaithful, she shouldn't obediently give up her position. Being a virtuous wife and loving mother, even if she didn't care, she should find some trouble for him. Just treat it as finding fun for herself. Her days were too dull, it would really be very boring. What a pity. She didn't have Wang's life. In front of many people, she couldn't show off her might. In the front courtyard, the others left reluctantly. Luo Peishan had spent a lot of effort to protect those treasures that were covetously eyed by those old men. Mother, next time, he wouldn't let this group of bastards come to his door. In this group, the youngest was close to 40, while the oldest was 60 to 70. Sun Yilin really couldn't be any more fresh and tender. After he knew that these people would come to the Luo family, he came on his own. He was the first to come and moved a lot of good things from his own courtyard, saying that it was for Luo Peishan. Now, he dawdled and stayed until the end. In fact, Sun Yilin rarely had dealings with the older generation. The elders that he usually saw were all dignified, strict, and meticulous. Today, after meeting them, he knew that this was perhaps only one side of these elders. In private, when they met their beloved things, they would even be like children, fighting with each other until their faces and ears turned red. After that group of people had been sent off as if they were sending off a plague god, Luo Peishan's gaze fell on Sun Yilin. His indignant heart gradually calmed down. After looking for a moment, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He thought of Wang who appeared in front of him last night. After knowing his unknown side, and even more after knowing that his bad reputation was only for the sake of smoothly marrying his own good grandson, he looked at the others. Even if Wang's ability to anger people was still the same, from all aspects, not to mention a group of young masters, even the old foxes of their age might not be able to compare to him. The first young master of the capital, Sun Yilin, could only be considered outstanding after excluding that person. Thinking about those things that he had brought before, he really did care about the third girl. Unfortunately, there was Wang, that living king of hell who planned meticulously step by step. No matter what, he couldn't get what he wanted. While he sighed, he couldn't help but feel pity again. However, Luo Peishan couldn't show it too obviously. Some things, if noticed by others, would cause serious consequences. You are considerate. Despite this, Luo Peishan still couldn't put on his initial bad attitude toward Sun Yilin. Sun Yilin still remembered before the engagement Luo Peishan's attitude when he looked for him. His nose wasn't his nose and his eyes weren't his eyes. Even if he had to bear the hostility of others, he would be righteous. Now, he was so amiable, especially during the day when he had such a conflict with Prince Kong. Now, he didn't know if he should be flattered or terrified. After Luo Peishan sat down, he also let Sun Yilin sit down. Because he knew that Sun Yilin wouldn't become his own grandson-in-law, Luo Peishan spoke a lot with Sun Yilin out of guilt and also out of love for talent. At least at this moment, he genuinely taught Sun Yilin as his own grandson. Because he had already entered the officialdom, he also talked a lot about the ways of being an official. Similarly, Luo Peishan didn't come in third place in the senior high school either. He didn't choose to enter the Hanlin Academy, but chose to be sent out. His experience, to a certain extent, was enough to be called legendary. Listening to him really made one feel as if they had studied for 10 years. His experience as an official were of great help to Sun Yilin. After all, no matter how smart Sun Yilin was, he didn't have broad knowledge and wisdom accumulated over time. Duke Dinggua's thoughts were all on his eldest son. Moreover, even if Duke Dinggua was in the imperial court, what he learned and thought were all about interests. He put Duke Dinggua's mansion and the Sun family in the first place, which was completely different from people like Luo Peishan. What he could teach Sun Yilin happened to be what Sun Yilin hated the most for so many years. Therefore, even if Duke Dinggua wanted to teach him carefully now, he was not interested in learning. Now, Luo Peishan was undoubtedly helping him make up for his shortcomings. In Sun Yilin's view, Luo Peishan was training his future grandson-in-law. Whether it was for this reason or his own shortcomings, he listened very attentively and his attitude could be said to be respectful. When he encountered something he didn't understand, he promptly raised it, and Luo Peishan was also unusually patient to answer his questions. Seeing that it was getting late, Luo Peishan didn't mean to see the guest out, and Sun Yilin also didn't intend to leave. "Why don't you stay at the Luo house tonight? What does Brother Lin think?" Luo Peishan suggested. Sun Yilin was naturally very happy. It would be impolite for this student to refuse. Luo Peishan nodded and sent someone to Duke Dinggua's mansion to report. Sun Yilin might think that this was Luo Peishan's recognition of him, and Luo Peishan didn't know when Prince Jin would break up this marriage. Perhaps it would be tomorrow. Therefore, the opportunity was rare. If he had time, he would teach him more. After all, once the engagement was dissolved, Sun Yilin would have no reason to come. When Duchess Dinggua Furen heard that her son was going to stay at the Luo house for the night, her expression was somewhat distorted. It must be known that since Sun Yilin was born, unless he went out of the city to play and stay in a village, or to places like White Dragon Temple, as long as he was in the city, even if it was his relatives and friends, he had never stayed at other people's houses. He always said that other people's houses were not comfortable, but now he made an exception. Just because it was the maiden home of the woman he liked. Duchess Dinggua Furen was very clear that if it was another woman that Sun Yilin didn't like, even after marriage, he would not stay at the Yu house. For the third miss of the Luo family, how many times had this first time appeared? Duchess Dinggua Furen thought that she couldn't count it clearly. At the same time, not only did her impression of Jingwan become worse, but even the Luo family was killed by her. In her opinion, the Luo family was shameless. They actually used an unmarried girl to keep her son. Otherwise, according to her son's temperament, how could he stay overnight? What kind of scholarly family was that? It was clearly a brothel. Such a family taught a girl who looked dignified, but who knew how lowly she was in her bones. Now that her son held her in such high regard, when he married her in the future, would he marry her daughter-in-law or her ancestor? If she didn't kill her arrogance, she didn't know if she would do something more shameless. "Come in," a nanny beside Duchess Dinggua Furen came in. "Madam. Go and reply to that side. I agree to meet them tomorrow." "Yes, madam." That was why it was said that once a person became paranoid, they would become unreasonable at certain times. Why did she think that her son was a delicious cake that others wanted to get by with unscrupulous means? Duchess Dinggua Furen was not the only one who cared about Sun Yilin staying overnight in the Luo family. Of course, no one's thoughts would be as dirty as Duchess Dinggua Furen's. Some people thought that Prince Kang's people wanted to win over Luo Peishan through Sun Yilin, while Prince Kang's people thought that Luo Peishan was expressing goodwill to the Empress and Prince Kang through Sun Yilin. Was it sincere or not? Prince Rui pushed him to the position of Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Did he deliberately sow discord, or did they secretly collude with each other? Because Luo Peishan was now in the teeth of the storm, people always paid attention to him. It was not difficult to know what was going on. However, at this time, the palace gate had been locked, but the Empress still knew the news at the first time. It was not that she had control of the palace to the extent that ordinary people could not reach, but that she cared about the news outside the palace, which also proved her ambition in another way. She did not believe in her son. She could only feel at ease when everything was under her control. As for Luo Peishan's words, "My nephew likes his aunt," in the daytime, the Empress naturally thought of all kinds of possible hidden meanings at the first time. It would be a lie to say that the Empress was completely indifferent, but there was no reason for her to hold on to this matter. If she really did not let it go, people would think that she was guilty. Her son really came from an improper background. Maybe at that time, he would be like the yellow mud falling into his pants. Besides, the Empress had always been good at enduring. When she heard this, she could even say, "Her son is getting more and more outrageous." At this moment, the Empress's face was solemn. She sat in her own bedroom, no one could tell whether she was happy or angry. It could be said that this son was stupid and easy to control, but sometimes too stupid and easy to mess things up. Sitting in this position, she could not brazenly interfere too much. At that time, not to mention that the people who relied on her son would be dissatisfied, Lu Qing would punish her in person. Therefore, even if the Empress had the world in her hands, she still felt powerless. No matter the reason why Sun Yilin stayed in the Luo family, it was a good thing for her. Although the grandfather and grandson did not talk all night, they still went to bed very late. In the morning, Luo Peishan was preparing to go to court. If it was not for the servant who reminded him that the second young lady was getting married today, he would not have known. However, even if he knew, Luo Peishan did not have much of a reaction. In his memory, Luo Jingqiang's face was blurred. He had people randomly pick 2 pieces of calligraphy and paintings and send them over to add to the dowry. The dowry was sent to the groom's house yesterday afternoon. These things added to the dowry naturally went with Luo Jingqiang today.